When you look at so many pitches, so many proposals, what are the aspects, or what is the kind of view that you take to identify what has the moonshot potential?
Yeah, thank you, and so thanks for bearing with me on the sound side. So you know, when we look at innovations in agriculture here at X, you know, I think back to our project where it started with this insight that in order to grow food sustainably on a global scale, we would need new tools to be able to manage the complexity of farming. And so, you know, we partner up with field experts to be able to develop and test software and hardware prototypes based on breakthroughs in innovation and across many realms. So things like artificial intelligence, simulation, sensors, robotics, plant perception, and more. And working across a broad diversity of crops, and really was so exciting to see the diversity of the crops across the prior pitches. And you know, for us, we were working on things like yellow pea in Iowa to soybean in Argentina, to learn about crops from emergence all the way to harvest, to find new ways to help breeders and farmers understand how a plant's genetics interact with the environment. And so through innovations and partnerships, we were able to come to this set of questions about the future of production to drive our explorations. So things like, what if every single plant could be monitored and given exactly the nutrition it needed and nothing more? Or what if we could help growers unpack not just yields, but profitability drivers? And what if we could measure just the subtle ways that plants respond to the environment? Or to match a crop variety to a piece of land to optimize sustainability. And so breeders and growers around the world have been working with us to run experiments and find new ways to understand the plant world. And the answers to these big questions are important enough in driving improvements for growers and planetary health that we think these are super worth pursuing.
We had Howard Shapiro on earlier, and he was basically categorizing into computing, analysis, and genetics when it comes to innovation. Can you give percentage points where the most projects are that you select, or where you perceive to be the most potential right now? Which of these areas?
Oh, interesting. Well, I certainly don't want to challenge Howard on his analysis.
Well, he didn't, so it's not a test. Yeah.
So you know, when I think about you know, the innovations in this space, I think that there's a lot of pieces that lean on the ability to analyze lots of information coming off of the farm. So there's lots of new data around soil and weather and altitude and all of these components, and the capability to really combine that and unpack and learn both what's happening today as well as start to be able to predict things in the future. I think that that's incredibly valuable. And I think genetics are sort of an element of that. It's one of the factors in a much larger understanding of agriculture, you know, genetics, environmental conditions, and farm management conditions, which the farmers are driving.
And can you just explain how big a factor artificial intelligence is?
How big a factor? So in terms of broad innovation, or in terms of...
Well, maybe have some concrete examples. I mean, do you have like already the artificial intelligent, well, the robot farmer who does it all by himself or something?
Yeah, so I think that artificial intelligence plays a number of roles within agriculture. And so the ability to start to understand things like biodiversity at a regional scale, there are artificial intelligence tools to support that, or things to understand plant level precision is where things like artificial intelligence are incredibly important. And so I think that it will continue to play a role. And a lot of the technologies that are being developed include elements of artificial intelligence, but that's certainly not the entire package of the ecosystem. So that's sort of one piece of a bigger puzzle.
what's the most exciting innovation you've come across this year that you're allowed to talk about?
Let me talk a little bit around, the climate friendly agriculture and how I think that this is really driving a lot of the innovation. And what's really exciting is to see the momentum that this is driving within the entrepreneurial space and within the ecosystem, because I think the increasing awareness of consumers and politicians and growers, I think this is actually one of the big breakthroughs that will drive a lot of the transformation, which is incredibly exciting. And I think the key to this sustainable and regenerative ag is moving from systems designed for monoculture and reliance on chemicals to systems that can manage the biodiversity and complexity of nature. And I think data can support a better understanding of the impacts, so environmental and financial, of certain practices, again, sort of at the individual farm or plant level, as well as broader regional or supply shed level for a consumer, a CPG company, or a government level. I spoke to a regenerative farmer in Kenya recently who was growing 16 crops on a single farm. And this approach to farming is much better for the environment, but the digital tools that we have today, our farm equipment, our input distribution, our offtake systems, our processing, none of these are designed to handle these kinds of practices. And so farmers looking to innovate to improve soil health and adapt to climate change are sort of hacking experiments on their own fields every season, but not getting the benefits of the learnings from collective experiments being run on farms that have similar characteristics. And so I think that these are the kinds of innovations that are really exciting, is to allow these collective learnings. There's a lot of hurdles today still, some as a result of where we are in technology development, and others are more sort of commercial in their orientation. So one, I would say, I see some limitations on what can be accurately measured today. So you look at this current race to build carbon marketplaces, and I think that there's still this huge gap. It's wonderfully exciting because there's a lot of power I think that this will have in transforming agriculture, but there's this gap in the prediction and the measurement of soil organic carbon, greenhouse gas emissions in a cost-effective way. And I'm hopeful that this growing interest in the investment and the partnerships between entrepreneurs, research institutes, the value chain, tech and government will remove some of the barriers in the coming years. I also, I can keep going on some of the innovations that I think are driving some of the transformation, but you feel free to cut me off if you want to go in a different direction.
No, but this sounds like you need data. You need to get more data to apply such innovations. And we all know that, Google and Amazon probably know what I eat, but where is the big data to find out harvesting patterns, or as you mentioned, that farm that needs data of how to make the best use of resources when you handle so many crops in such a tricky structure there. Where's the big data in agriculture?
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of different types of data within agriculture. Satellite imagery, of course, which is freely, publicly available public goods from the government. That's a big driver of a lot of the innovation today. Weather data, things that will help us to understand how patterns in climate change will affect production. There's a lot of information that sits within different groups. So if you are a farmer cooperative, you might be collecting production information from your growers to be able to understand what's being produced and then what's being sold through the group. So there's lots of data that sits within different silos, and I think that depending on the interest of that group, there is a lot of information. Much of it is publicly available now, and increasingly governments investing in soil quality data, for example, understanding soil maps of entire countries, to be able to start to unpack some of these environmental pieces. How do we understand how carbon can be sequestered? So these are massive data sets that can help various groups understand how to adapt and how to drive ecosystem services, for example, to better payments for farmers. So there's data. So I guess in summary, there's lots of data that sits within different pockets, but there's also a huge amount of publicly available data that today is really driving a lot of the information and the innovation.
Just with asking you to give us a very, very brief one-word answer, what do you expect to be the next big thing in terms of innovation in agriculture?
Oh, one word. I think that perception on the farm, so making equipment smarter, making mobile devices smarter, to be able to really understand how plants are reacting to the environment and management practices. I think that'll be a big breakthrough.
Great. Erica Bliss, Business Development Manager at X. Thank you so much for being with us today, sharing your insights.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.